In this video, I'm going to talk about flipping primary custody. Now, one of you requested this on the channel, so I'm going to do my best to do this topic justice. I assume when you made the request of flipping primary custody, it essentially means you want one parent to have what the other parent has currently, right? Like if one person has every other weekend and a weekday overnight. I don't know what the parenting plan was, but if one person has every other weekend and a weekday overnight, we want to flip it to where the current parent that has all the other time has every other weekend and a weekday overnight, right? Just an exact flip of custody, flip of primary custody. So if you have a 50-50, this doesn't really apply to you, except maybe you might have primary for school, but this really applies for somebody who has less than 50% and they're looking to flip primary custody. So I'm going to dig into that. But before I do, let me just remind you, if you like this content and find it helpful, don't forget to hit like on the video. Also subscribe to the channel so that you get notified as new videos are released. If you are the parent that does not have primary custody and you're looking to flip it, okay, there are a few things that I would say. The first thing that I can tell you is that moving the child from their current, especially if they're school age, but moving them from their current community and all of that is an uphill battle. Okay. I do have somebody actually right now that is trying to do this, and the parents live, several hours apart, and one of the parents is trying to do this. Now, in this particular case, there are a lot of educational issues going on, like severe, probably some of the most severe I've seen on the education side. And there's also a fair amount of health issues going on that those two things have both been going on for several years and have kind of not been addressed while the one parent has had primary custody. And so the other parent is saying, look, this person's had primary custody. It's been, several years now, and we're still in this predicament. It's actually gotten worse, and I'm asking to flip primary custody. Okay. And I think those are a couple of good, strong points. But if you're trying to flip primary custody, one of the first things I would tell you is that if you live far apart and you have the option to live closer, try to move closer. Okay. That's one of the first things you can do is logistically be in the child's community. If you're not in the child's community, the court has to make a decision to disrupt that child, and they've got to have really, really strong reasons to do that. They don't just take that lightly of disrupting a child from their regular routine. So, I've had that situation before too, where I had a client that, the parent that was the primary parent lived near the school and all that, and the other parent lived, 30, 45 minutes away in like the next county over. I said, look, move where you're in the district, move where, and I know that's not always possible, but it is one of the things that will help strengthen your arguments if you're trying to do this. One of the things I tell people is you have to lay out your case, right? You got to work on this over a period of time. You can't just go, oh, what are the right things to say? Let me go file something and boom, flip primary custody. No, a lot of times we have to build a case over a period of several months to get to the point to where we've gotten everything sort of all on point for that move. I don't know exactly what dynamics you're specifically dealing with, but the first thing I would say is try to live close if you can. The reasons that the court would look at changing primary custody go back to the best interest factors. Now, no, depending on the state that you live in, sometimes there are timelines where you can't apply for a change before a certain amount of time unless there is a safety risk to the children in some way. Okay. So like certain states, you have to wait, a year or maybe 2 years or whatever before you can even ask for it, unless there is some sort of major safety concern for the children. But one of the things the court does look at heavily is education, especially as the child gets older. I don't think it's as much a factor in grade school, but I think when they start to get into middle school and high school to the point where they're starting to look at careers, what they want to do long-term, I think the quality of the school and all that kind of thing does come into play more. So what I always tell people is, look, get on and do research about the school they're at now and the school you want to move them to. Compare and contrast. Is your school better? Is that school better? Like figure out, is that a piece that's in your favor? if it is, obviously you want to bring that up. It's also a factor of the community that the child's in. Like how old is the child? Has the child lived in the same community the whole time? Again, a factor, that leans more in favor of not disrupting the child. A lot of times people will say, well, there's new siblings in the home. There's siblings from the second marriage in the home. That's fine. And that's an important fact, but it doesn't override the relationship with the other parent. Okay, the parents are the primary relationship, and then the court understands that there are half siblings, step siblings, whatever the case may be, but those relationships don't necessarily trump the other parent and their relationship. The other thing that can be a factor, depending on the age of the child, is like if you don't have appropriate space for the child. Like I had one case where the child is about 5 or 6, I think, and still sleeping in a home with there's multiple adults, single adults living in the home, and the parent is just sort of living in the living room in like a little sectioned off, area, sleeping, and the child sleeping with that parent. So that child doesn't have their own room, their own space, and they're exposed to other single adults that the other parent doesn't know. That's all kind of a concern for the court, but it's not as much of a concern at 5 as it would be at like 14. If you have a 14-year-old girl that's not having her own space, her own privacy, a door she can shut and lock and all that, that's going to be a much bigger concern for the court than it is going to be at like 5. Although I don't think that's a great situation, right? So it probably is something that the other parent can bring up. And then you've got things like the extent to which one person supports the other person's parenting. So if the other parent is constantly blocking you, and if the other parent is the primary parent and they're constantly being uncooperative about you having more time, blocking, changes, not being cooperative, whatever, then, you can show that like you've, again, hopefully built a case that shows that you're cooperative and flexible and that you support the other person's parenting. You facilitate calls, you facilitate whatever. That shows that you support the other person. That's going to be a factor in flipping that custody as well. Sometimes if the child has health issues, like I said, that aren't being followed through on, or, medication that's not being complied with or taken. I've seen people, like during COVID, the shots were a big deal. I saw a lot of people that lost legal custody during that time because they wouldn't follow through on, a physician's advice of whether to vaccinate or not vaccinate or whatever, all those types of things. So there's a few different things, but the health, safety, and welfare becomes kind of the key components. Education is very heavily weighted, but the best thing that you can do is this always goes back to best interest of the child, whatever kind of change we're going to ask the court to make. So the best thing you can do is go out and research best interest of the child in your state. I think most of us think of best interest of the child as just like, oh, yeah, eating vegetables is in the best interest of the child. No, that's not what it means in a court system. Okay. In a court system, eating your vegetables is good for you. It's not a best interest of the child factor. You have to understand that best interest of the child is a legally defined term in every state. So if you go out and look that up, it's going to tell you what the factors are under best interest of the child in your state, and sometimes that's 6 factors. Sometimes there's 12. It varies state to state, but generally it's the health, safety, and welfare of the kids having a relationship with both parents. So again, if you're going to flip custody, you need to be able to explain what parenting plan you think it should be and why, and how that's going to continue to facilitate the child's relationship with the other parent. So go look up those factors so that you can kind of then sit down and look at them and go, okay, well, there's 10 factors. How many of these things are in my favor and how many of these things are in the other parent's favor? That'll kind of give you some guidance as to where you currently sit on this issue, right? I mean, as always, it's good to get, legal advice, consult with attorney or whatever, so that you can get that legal input on where you stand. But I think you can get a general idea of where you're at by looking it up. And then, if you feel like, well, I'm not ready to I want to build the case, I'm not ready to pull the trigger on an attorney yet, right? Then you look at those factors and you go, okay, what's in my favor? And what are some that are in the other parent's favor that I can work on shifting? into my favor. That's part of building your case over time so that you are then ready to go in and say, hey, I want to file this to try to change custody. But you have to take a step back from it in the first instance and figure out what things are even in your favor and what things aren't, so that you can try to shift those things that aren't to give you a stronger case in front of the court. I hope that's helpful on this issue. If you'd like more help with these types of topics, you can go to divorceuniversityonline.com/VIP-coaching. There is information on that page on my group coaching programs for moms and for dads. And there's also information on my premium VIP one-on-one coaching services. If you have a more complex case, custody evaluators, attorney for the children, domestic violence, that type of thing going on, or maybe you just got so much chaos with a difficult narcissistic ex that you need all the help you can get, then maybe that is a better option for you. Okay, so thanks for joining me. I'll see you guys next time.
We'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the horizon, turn us to thousands.